you. Hope you enjoy this morning, and over to you, Gail, to take us through this morning.
Well, I would if my screen would move on. What's happened here? Let me just see. There we go. Morning, everybody, and welcome to our top tips session. Difficult thing to say in the morning. And particular welcome, because I believe we've also got some colleagues from Belgium, Netherlands, and France. My name's Gail Cookson, and I am the Legacy and International Marketing Director at WPNC. And my colleague is Claire, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Claire Daniels. I'm Fundraising Strategy Director here at WPNC. Lovely to be here speaking with you this morning.
Right, so let's get cracking and start off with the first top tip. So legacy gifts are large, and legacy teams are often small. So everyone needs to be a legacy ambassador in your organization. So from the receptionist through to the chairperson. And you want to involve as many stakeholders as possible, provide them with briefings on new campaigns, new materials, new events, and generally create a buzz around legacy marketing. And also maybe train some relevant staff in legacy conversations and create a culture where all roads lead to legacies. Because what we want to do is change the narrative. It's not all about death and dying. And I know the last sort of 24 months, the whole kind of death situation has become perhaps less taboo. But what we really want to remind people is that leaving a gift in your will is possibly one of the most life-affirming actions somebody can do. So moving on to the next top tip. And let's be clear, people write their wills when they need to. And I know that we do see will writing going up a bit in special months, particularly like the month we have now, but they write their will when it's an important key stage for them. So moving house, getting married, having children. So we need to look for channels that can target them at these times. And sometimes your targeting cannot be precise. It's going to be a little bit indirect. So, for example, looking at products and services associated with moving house, like removals companies, hiring a van, and buying new furniture. But in any event, you want to try and drip feed the message fairly continually over the year so that you can keep your cause front of mind for them. And the aim is to touch the many, but cultivate the few, because you have limited resources. So you really want to concentrate on those that are going to support you in the long term. And when they do inquire, be ready to respond quickly. Now, I'm sure plenty of you have done mystery shopping on your own organization, but it's worth just checking how quickly do you get a response out, be it online or offline, when you get an inquiry. So over to Claire.
I wanted to talk a little bit about targeting. Now, obviously, we could talk about audience-led fundraising all day long, and specifically for legacies, but we do only have 20 minutes for these top tips. We know that we all need to be increasingly more audience-led rather than necessarily product-led. And for example, data that we found in some research that we've recently undertaken, specifically looking at legacy audiences, has unveiled that having no children is a key motivator for leaving a gift in your will to charity. So it's just one example of how we can think about targeting. But how might you target, voluntarily childless people? And how might we think about the fact that we know there's going to be increasing numbers of voluntarily childless people in the future? So audience insights like that can be really helpful, I think, to think about specifically, yes, about channel and where we might find those people. So a voluntarily childless person aged, in their 50s might do something very different to somebody who's got children or maybe even grandchildren who lives in their 50s, and the places that they are might be different, but also the messages are going to be different for them as well. So their reasons for leaving a gift in their will are slightly different, and they're thinking very much about the idea of wanting to have impact and not having their own children to do so. So how might you think about your messaging in that way as well, as something really worth thinking about. And it's also very important to have a very clear proposition. So we know that proposition work is obviously very important, again, in all areas of fundraising, and it's just as true for legacy marketing. You really need to spend time getting to know your audience, to getting to understand what they think. You need to understand just not what they feel about your organization now, but also what they have the potential to feel in the future, and what you can offer to give them that feeling. So there are obviously multiple motivations. And again, our research has shown that there's multiple motivations to give a legacy gift. But for you and your organization, there'll be one core reason that you exist. And it's really important to try and bring those things together and find the sweet point between their motivation for giving and your cause and why you exist. For legacies in particular, it's really important to think beyond the here and now. So you can't necessarily pick up your IG fundraising proposition and directly transfer it to legacies, for example, because we're talking often to people for whom, hopefully, and certainly they will want to think, hopefully, the gift that they're leaving in their will might not realize for 20, 30, 40 years time sometimes. So, if you're an organization trying to solve a problem, if you're trying to find a cure or you're trying to solve something that's happening right now, what you need to really think about your proposition in terms of what will you still be doing in 30 years time? What impacts can people have in the future? And what can you say that really galvanizes them and excites them about the potential for this huge gift that has a long lasting effect, but also doesn't invalidate your efforts now and the work that you're doing when you're asking people to donate right now. And I think that's really core and important to your legacy proposition.
Sorry, is that right? So building on that point, it's all about telling stories. And I know storytelling is very much on trend, but I think for a gift in your will, it is one of the most personal of gifts. And it is saying something about the values of that person and their desire to make a difference after they've died. So as Claire was saying, your organization's story has to go to the very heart of what you are. And you need to give them the reason why they want to give to your organization over and above another one. So what you're really aiming for is becoming their favorite cause. That's the really critical thing. And that's on a very emotional level, but also on a rational level. You need to show how your organization has made an impact in the past and, of course, going on into the future. And there have been several examples of how that's worked. For example, some people have used timelines to show how they have responded in the past to global emergencies and how they need to be prepared in the future. And that's where the gift in the will comes. Another major story was around from Marie Curie. And they tapped into the very important insight around the need for better end-of-life care. And they intertwined the action and the desire of the donor and the beneficiary in one simple thought: one last wish. So telling stories, really getting passionate about your cause is what it's really about at the heart of legacy marketing. So moving on to asking. And we've talked about training people to have legacy conversations, but it is important to think about who has the authority to ask a potential supporter to make a legacy. And you've got to think about maybe who has the best story to tell, who can have that empathy with the audience. An example I saw recently where a very young, very bright campaigner was talking to an audience much older than herself and their life experience was going to be so different. So there was going to be that bit of a gap. Indeed, she knew what she was talking about, but it was just that huge gap that didn't kind of work. So think about perhaps retired volunteers who might be able to talk about their great experience to other volunteers. If you've got people in the organization who have already pledged to you, then they have the right to ask, because they're not asking you to do something that they haven't already done. So don't always default to the chief exec or the director of fundraising. Find somebody who really does have that great story to tell.
Yes. So top tip number 7 is around translation. I think, this is true again of all of us internally at charities. Often, we get locked up in our own language, and there's a way of talking about things, and it can be easy to forget that not all audiences understand what we're saying. This is particularly true of legacy giving. The language of legacy giving and will writing can be a huge barrier for some people. It can be quite technical, which is really interesting. I saw some research in a study that showed that when people were asked to make a gift to charity in their will, there was almost a doubling in response to that compared with being asked to bequest a gift to charity, for example. So, really, in the nicest possible way, really kind of dumbing down the language can be really helpful. We've also seen that, leaving a gift in your will is often by many seen as quite a privileged thing to be able to do. Even the idea of making a will in the first place, one of the biggest barriers to will making in the research that we did recently was that actually people felt that they didn't have a reason to make a will because they didn't have assets worth making a will about. And so it's really important to make it clear for people, and break down the barriers around that. So it's not now or never. Wills can be changed, wills can be updated. And it's really important to show people that it's really easy. I did hear of one charity, and I thought this was brilliant, who literally gave people the suggested wording for their will themselves. So rather than saying, please leave a gift in your will to somebody who's never even thought about making their will before, it's empowering people with the tools to feel good about that gift and the potential of that. It's also important, as Gail mentioned earlier, not to focus your legacy on death. Again, there's loads of research out there that you can read on this, and potentially there's even an argument to lose the word legacy altogether, because legacy insinuates a kind of forever lasting impact. It's a pretty high bar. It feels to people like a pretty big thing to do, to leave a legacy gift. Whereas thinking about this as planned giving, thinking about this as, I will make a donation to charity at the end of my life, or when I have the money later on in life and it's available. It's just a slight nudge and a slight tweak in the language, but it really starts to take away those barriers to it feeling like such a big deal for people. And if we want people to include us in our will, I think on average, people include kind of 3 point something charities in their will. You need to make it as easy as possible for them. Top tip number 8 is really around whether legacy giving is the first or the last ask. So traditionally, obviously, we think of fundraising in terms of building up to the ultimate gift in terms of a legacy, and that's a really important kind of pyramid model. We've recently undertaken research looking at the potential of Generation X and millennials to give gifts to charities in their wills. And one of the main findings of that research was that there was already the intention for many to leave a gift to charity in their will, but many yet hadn't been asked or didn't feel that it was kind of in front of them. So less than half of our survey remembered seeing a legacy advert of any type from a charity. And yet research has shown that if we those that pledge a gift in their will to charity are significantly more valuable to that charity than within their lifetime, so excluding the pledge, than those that don't. Because there's something very psychological around, as Gail mentioned earlier, having picked that favorite charity, this is the charity that I'm going to go and I'm going to give this big gift to at the end of my life, that makes you more inclined to donate during your life during your life itself. In fact, there were 2 studies in the US that found that donors were more than 75% more valuable after they had made a pledge compared with those that had not. So we're kind of posing the question that there's something really interesting about kind of flipping that pyramid on its head and thinking about, how we engage people to make that planned gift, to leave that legacy now, to make the pledge to do that, and also in turn, therefore, activate their support and their engagement and their value earlier in their lifetime rather than later. Tip 9 follows on really nicely from that, because in the same vein, our research found that one of the key barriers to writing a will is not knowing where to start. And although we know that writing a will is becoming more common than ever, there was around a 50% increase in Google search popularity for will writing in the last 10 years. We know that the number of wills made during 2020 tripled. The statistics, like 10% of millennial, I think it's something like 10% of millennials made a will in the last 2 years, which is like unheard of. There's a real appetite for free will writing services like never before, and a potential opportunity actually to provide support and guidance through that process in return for a small donation. So potentially there's an opportunity for us as an organisations to think about how we might use the tools that we normally use in our legacy fundraising, and how we might use those as value exchange opportunities for acquisition of new audiences at this moment in time. Our research indicated that most people would rather donate to a charity than pay a solicitor for their support, for example.
And finally, top tip number 10. It's amazing the number of resources that are now available to legacy marketers. Here's just a few on the screen. When I did my first legacy campaign, not wanting to sound 102, but only SME and Ford existed with their notification service, and I think they were still using quill pens. They have radically updated their system since then. So there's lots of information available. Remember a charity I saw just posted something on LinkedIn this morning about some new findings, so go and check them out. Some of the information is for free, some of it is subscription. It's really useful because classical measurement it is, as we know, tricky for legacy marketing, and so being able to benchmark with others either in your direct cause sector or in the wider sector is, of course, enormously helpful. So those are our top 10 tips. If you're interested in knowing more about the research that Claire undertook, then perhaps you'd like to join us on April the 27th, when we will be doing an extended webinar in the morning, looking at how millennials and Generation X view will making and associated subjects. And I believe that John is going to put the Zoom invitation in the chat so that you can click on that straight away should you want to sign up for it. So that's our top 10 tips. Thank you very much for your time. Now's the opportunity for questions, and I'll hand over to John, who is powering this session. Have we got any questions? Oh, he's on mute.
Right, I've just come back in the room. I have just posted the link. So if anyone would like to register early for the next webinar, that would be great. We will, of course, be promoting it, and I think all of you on the call today will be receiving an email invitation anyway with a link to registration. So you'll get many chances from which to sign up, but it should be a pretty good session once we've got all the insights and digested it. Thank you very much, Gail and Claire. That was a really fascinating, if not speedy run through, and we did it in 21 minutes. So bang on time, bang on time. It's, as far as questions are concerned, I haven't seen any. There are no questions asked yet. I guess people are still thinking through a lot of what you said and taking some notes. And this is probably the point when I should say, so it's not over and done with if you don't get a chance to send a question in right now. You can see some contact details there for Gail and Claire, where you can email questions, or you can come directly to me, john.eversley@WPNC Agency. We work with quite a few charities, as I'm sure you all know from that little talk from Gail and Claire. You'll have assessed that we've got a fair amount of legacy expertise. So whatever questions, whatever areas that you want to look at, whether it's looking at propositions, insights, looking at the creative, looking at the whole legacy strategy, please don't be afraid to get in touch. Always happy to have a chat about it, and I'm always happy to offer Gail and Claire up for the first conversations, and I'm sure you'll get me for that later. So if there are no other questions coming through, so I should probably, before we finish the call, I should probably just mention that there'll be no webinar next week. We've had them every week for the last couple of weeks, but there's no webinar next week. We're taking a bit of a break, and the next webinar where we're going to be talking about online donations, and Vicky Reeves will be picking that one up on the 30th of March. So if you haven't already registered for that one, you could use same details, and you can register for that one, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the 30th. So I guess before we go, almost as there is no questions, let me put something to both you and Gail and Claire. So you've had a quick dabble and a quick look at some of the research coming through. Is there anything that you, without giving anything away and teasing the next webinar coming up in April, is there anything sort of surprising coming through? Anything that's shaken you in terms of what you can see coming through from the research findings?
It's really hard without giving anything away. I mean, I think we touched on a couple of things there in today's session. There's definitely some really interesting thoughts about legacy as acquisition for younger audiences that I find really quite interesting. As increasingly, we are seeing in the IG world, and in cash, value exchange propositions being quite valuable. Actually, there's a really strong value exchange proposition potentially there for legacy. I think also just that the conversation around death in general is really shifting. So there's so much innovation in the kind of death world, if you like, apps and insurance and so many different things that people, younger people certainly, are becoming much more aware of the need to plan, the need to make their wills and make their plans. And so how charities can kind of fit into those plans are really interesting. And although younger audiences might feel a bit, that their gift potentially isn't going to realize for a long time, and there's something really powerful, I think, about the fact that getting someone to pledge is going to increase their value to you in their lifetime as well. So there's also something about thinking of legacy pledging beyond the gift itself as an opportunity is also really exciting.
Thank you very much, Claire. So there was one thing that came up in the chat, which was if you can't attend on the 27th, will it be recorded? Absolutely will. And if you register to attend the event, you will get a copy of the presentation, or the recording anyway, which has also reminded me that today's webinar was also recorded. And if those of you who've been on any previous webinars, you'll know that we tend to send anyone participating a copy of the presentation so you can digest at your leisure. And so that's probably a good time to say now, because we are just about to run out of time. Thank you very much for coming this morning. I hope you found it really interesting. I'd like to say thank you to Gail, and also thank you to Claire for presenting today, and hope you all have a very good day. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks then. Bye.